We're just gonna wait a couple minutes for everyone to come in. We're really glad to have you here tonight. Really glad that the Ewing Green Team invited us from the Watershed to be here.
So for people that just arrived, we're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're just going to give people some time to arrive. I already see some people are using the chat. Yes, it will be recorded. Sorry about that, folks. I muted myself. What I said before was we were going to get started in 2 minutes, but now that has turned to 1 minute. All right, it's 7:05 and it's time to get started. So my name is Kendra McCoy. I am the Delaware River Advocate and I am of the Watershed Institute. And I'm so happy to be here tonight with my colleague, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here too. My name is Olivia Spildooren. I'm the River Friendly Coordinator at the Watershed Institute.
And we're here tonight because the Ewing Green Team has invited us to speak, and we're talking about gardening for stormwater and wildlife. So I would like to thank everyone for being here because I know it's a lot to give your time and we've all been very zoomed out. The first part of the presentation will be short and it'll focus on stormwater and flooding. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. We'll address those questions before we move on to Olivia's presentation, which is the meat of this webinar on the practical steps for creating a rain garden. Although we are focusing on things individuals can do on their property or in their community, I want us to keep the bigger picture in mind. Here I have several photos from Hurricane Irene taken from Trenton as well as Lambertville. But we know that those locations weren't the only ones that were hit by Ida. I'd like to take a moment to show you guys a short clip from CBS News covering the story that occurred. Please give me time to just switch over my screen.
Woman's life in the raging floodwaters last week.
We showed you the body camera footage last night from Ewing Police in Mercer County. Now that officer is explaining what happened. CBS 2's Alice Gaynor reports.
Body cam footage from police officer Justin Quinlan shows him walking through waist-deep water last Wednesday night at Whitehead and Ewingville roads, responding to a call of stranded drivers. He saw about 7 cars with people making their way out of the water and asked if they needed help.
They said, no, we're all good, but that lady over there needs help. I didn't see her at first, so I'm glad that they were able to point that out for me. I shined my flashlight towards her, and I could see she was just holding on for dear life.
He says he straddled the guardrail and made his way over to her.
Hold on, dear. Don't move, okay?
All I could think about was getting over to her and making sure I got my hands on her just to keep her in that place. I didn't want to lose her.
Are you injured right now?
No.
Okay, swing your leg up over this guardrail for me.
Officer Quinlan says though he felt he could walk them out of the cold, fast-moving water, he decided to stay put and wait for firefighters.
I don't know what's moving with this water, so I don't want to try and walk across, okay? God forbid there's a big log that comes loose or something like that.
We said a couple prayers together and just I kept reassuring her that we're going to be okay. Someone's going to come help us.
The body cam footage provided ends here, but Quinlan says 25 to 30 minutes later, firefighters came, put life vests on them, and used a rope. The woman, whose name he didn't get, was put into an ambulance to go get checked out.
If she is watching or she's listening, I'm glad she's okay.
Officer Quinlan also has this message to all drivers.
When you see that water, it's better to just turn around. There's no point in trying to drive through it.
He says he's happy the video shows the good side of police work, but hopes it also shows people why you should stay off the roads during a storm. In Ewing Township, Mercer County, Alice Gaynor, CBS 2 News.
For more information on how to donate to Manville VF.
All right, I am going to share my screen once more. Bear with me as I deal with technology. There we go. So I show this so that we can think about the bigger issues behind building a rain garden and taking care of our stormwater locally, that lives are literally at stake. So
Kendra, before you keep going, sorry, there's still a box kind of covering your slide.
I'm sorry, friends.
Just want to make sure that there's not a void of information.
Thank you. I apologize. So how did we get to this point? Well, technology, there we go. So in this figure, you can see observed precipitation changes from 1991 to 2012. The darkest green shows an increase of precipitation events of more than 50%, and the dark brown shows the opposite, a decrease of greater than 15%. Over this time span, our region is having a net increase in precipitation events. Secondly, we're not only having more precipitation events, we're also having more heavy downpours in those events. So it's raining more often, and when it rains, it rains. And then finally, our land use has changed. So this figure shows changes in land cover from 1972 to 2010, with red being developed land. Developed land means more hard surfaces that don't allow water to penetrate. We call these surfaces impervious cover. Put that all together and what do you get? More runoff. And these factors lead to us having both a quality issue and a quality issue when it comes to runoff. All right, so the quantity problem. With more impervious cover, we get less water can infiltrate into the ground, either for shallow storage or deep aquifer storage. And you can see that in the top left figure. Now, the result, more stormwater, and it has an increase in quantity. More stormwater, and as it increases in quantity, it gains strength and can cause serious flooding or stream bank erosion, which will destabilize the stream and provide less of a protection for communities nearby. The quality problem. The runoff is a collection of all the small solids and liquids that we release onto our roads, yards, home, workplaces, what have you. All of this is funneled together as stormwater, which is an issue not only for the health of the stream and the ecosystem, but also for drinking water, fish consumption, and recreation. In fact, most of our waterways aren't healthy enough to support various aquatic life, or we don't have enough data to make a conclusion about it, which is a different kind of problem. So bringing it back to Ewing. For your community of Ewing, you have two major hydrological unit 14 watersheds. It's one of the units of watersheds that we use. The larger the HUC number, the larger the watershed. So you have two HUC 14 watersheds, the Alexa Hawken Moores Jacob Creek watershed, and then that drains directly into the Delaware River. And you also have the Assunpink Creek Shippatawkin, the Assunpink Creek below the Shippatawkin Creek watershed. And funny enough, that flows northeast into the Assunpink Creek and then eventually goes down and joins with the Delaware River. So Ewing is a special situation where it is an upstream community to those in Hamilton and Trenton, because what it puts in the water impacts them. But on the other side, it's actually an upstream and a downstream community when you're looking at the Delaware River. So it breaks up further into sub-watersheds, and we could just keep going and going and going. Watersheds are a lot like nesting dolls. They fit into each other until you go smaller and smaller and smaller. But again, it shows how the patterns of where the water flows is dependent on the topography. So this last image here is a map showing the estimated impervious cover for Ewing. This was done internally on our team. This is not our official impervious cover report. This is using the 2015 Mercer County impervious surface study. And from here, we can see we have about 35% of the land use is impervious cover. So what does that mean for a water quality issue? So you want to be below 10%. That's where you are not having impact on the water quality or quantity. And as you go higher and higher, you're reaching impacted on the water systems to not supporting life. At the estimated 35%, Ewing is hitting into that it's not going to be able to support the aquatic system. All right, so how do we move away from this? Away from what we have in the image, what we have here in our image, which shows our old style of managing water. Gray infrastructure meant to hold water and do not much else. Nothing's going to address the quality or the quantity issue, but green infrastructure will. It's a means to localize stormwater management, use natural processes to treat the stormwater, and it's steps to depave or mitigate the impact of impervious surface. So by working with the topography and utilizing local plant species that thrive in intermittent flooding, we can transition from a space like this to this. So first, you have to start thinking about how much stormwater your property produces. So here we have didn't need to go that far. All right. So here we can see the estimated storm water that will run off a patio or garage of a roof in a 1-inch storm and a 1-inch rainstorm, and that's generally the standard, that would be 240 gallons of runoff from a teeny 1-inch storm. For reference, that would be about 55-gallon buckets filled with water, which is going to flood somewhere, either your basement, your neighbor's basement, or down the street to contribute to flooding. And that's not the only issue that contributes to flooding. All right, it's not just impervious surfaces. It can be things like broken or poorly angled downspouts that are causing just ponding in your yard, compacted soils that refuse to take up the water and prevent it from infiltrating. Or you might be flooding yourself with landscaping that's edging up on the corner of your yards and holding the water in. Or maybe it's a loss of trees, so we no longer have those great sponges. So for many, many years, we use conventional solutions to address our stormwater. And we did this through detention basins, but they don't absorb water. They don't clean water. They can't handle large volumes of water effectively. They require lots of mowing, and they often get clogged. In fact, detention basins were designed to hold water for a total of 1.5 minutes before exiting the overflow pipe. Really think about that. The infrastructure we have is not designed to support us through these next few years. So let's take an example. And this is not to scale, it is an artist rendering. But let's say you moved into this sweet little home because it had character, it was charming, beautiful, mature trees. You can see from the blue arrows the flow of the water. Now, the original stormwater that was created by this property was the patio led to 90 gallons of stormwater runoff in a 1-inch storm. The 2,000 square foot roof let 1,200 gallons of runoff in a 1-inch storm. That sidewalk, another 27 gallons. That driveway, 480 gallons for its 800 square feet. So it has to all go somewhere. And the total is 1,797 gallons of runoff occur because of this property in a 1-inch storm. But it all flows away from you. It all flows downspouts. And in fact, let's think about those trees a little bit more. Because if you hop onto treebenefits.com, it tells you that those beautiful mature northern oaks capture just about 24,000 gallons of water each year. So all of them together are giving you 100,000 gallons of water soak up, just as they're out there doing their thing. Little side note, the green ash trees absorb about as much as the northern red oak. We should consider what we're losing when we lose them to disease and pests in our area. Just a little 2 cents. So things started to change. Your family started to grow. You were spending more time at home because there was an international pandemic. So you decided to build onto your house and improve it. So you added an addition. That's 1,600 feet. That's going to be another 960 gallons of stormwater. And then also you took out that tree because it was in the way. And you added a pool and a terrace. That's another 1,200 gallons of water. And then another tree had to come out. And if you have a pool, you got to have a pool house, right? So for 800 square feet, you're making another 480 gallons of water running off. And with all that work you did in the back, it seemed a little weird not to do some sprucing up in the front. So redoing your sidewalk, you changed it a bit. So now it's 240 square feet instead of the measly 45. And now it's going to push off 144 gallons of stormwater. And unfortunately, nothing lives forever and trees are included. And that tree in your front yard died to disease. So you managed to create 4,640 additional square feet of impervious surface, which translates to 2,784 gallons of water in a 1-inch storm. plus the loss of your 3 trees. So you no longer have that 75,000 gallon sponges on your yard. So what used to be a charming little house that basically took care of its own stormwater is creating a problem for those downhill in a very big way. So all of us contribute. This isn't a problem that's just related to warehouses, just related to developers, just related to people that want a pool and a pool house. It's all of us. This small 2,800 square foot roof in a 1-inch storm lays off 1,680 gallons of water. You would need 30 and a half rain barrels to hold this in a 1-inch storm. In fact, a lot of our downspouts aren't pointed in the right way. So sometimes we're flooding ourselves as we lead to ponding, or we're damming up our own yard with landscaping, causing the water to stay in. So some of it is not about the impervious surface, but the layout around us. So there's lots of things that can affect stormwater. All right, it's your drainage areas, the total amount, precipitation, land cover, but issues like your type of soil, your slope, the type of flow, whether it's a strong sheet flow or concentrated, those all are going to have an impact. So the importance is everybody making that effort. And you all are taking the step right now by learning about rain gardens. So I want to take a little bit of a breather, check the chat for any questions, and say thank you for your time. All right, so.
Looks like we do have one question.
Yeah, so, oh, and I want to be on my question slide. So, all right, so are there types of hardscape that produce less runoff, like pavers with spaces in between versus solid cement? Yes, there are options. Obviously, the more you have something that can infiltrate, allow the water to infiltrate, it's going to be better. There's lots of green infrastructure related landscapers that can help. While Olivia presents, I'm going to try to find a quick reference and drop that in the chat that can talk about some of the different types of impervious surface and pervious surface alternatives. And like everything with this, there's going to be a compromise. There's a reason why humans have structured it so we have these hard impenetrable surfaces for roads and roofs, but it's time to consider alternatives. Any other questions before we move on to Olivia's segment?
It looks like that's the only question right now, so.
All right, so you can, if you have any questions at the end, you can absolutely ask me. I'm also going to drop my contact information in the chat, and thank you all for your time. I'll turn it over to you, Olivia.
Yeah, thank you. I think that was a great start to the presentation that gave everyone some good background. Might even mean I won't have to describe as many things in this part of the presentation because you're already experts. So just making sure you're just seeing the presentation right now.
Correct, Olivia, it looks great.
Okay, awesome. Let's see. As Kendra mentioned, we want to move from the traditional gray infrastructure to green infrastructure, which is, I like the literal, everything is green in the green infrastructure, as you can see in this picture. So we'll talk today a little bit about one type of green infrastructure called a rain garden. So what is a rain garden? It's basically a shallow landscaped pit or depression that collects your stormwater from hard surfaces, like we've mentioned, roofs, roads, driveways, etc. We fill it with some special rain garden soil often, and then plant it with native plants suited for water absorption and filtration. This structure also helps bring back a critical part of the water cycle called infiltration, and it merges two goals. Basically, you get the best of both worlds, a garden that is beautiful and functions to protect water quality as well. So there are many benefits to rain gardens, but I'll just talk about a few. As we said, native plants help to filter and clean polluted stormwater that runs off of hardscapes that will pick up pollution. But by bringing back infiltration which is lost through the impervious surfaces, we not only can help restore groundwater, recharge aquifers, we can also filter some of that pollution that was picked up in the stormwater. Also, by allowing this slow infiltration or soaking of water into the soil, this decreases the amount of water running over the surface of your yard or pooling in big puddles, which reduces erosion and flooding. And finally, native plants provide quality food and shelter for insects and wildlife. So now here is a cross-section diagram of a typical rain garden. You can see coming from the left-hand side, water is coming off the turf grass and also from the house's downspout. You'll see some rocks at the left where the runoff is coming into. We could call this the inlet, which serves to slow the flow of the water into the rain garden so erosion doesn't occur. And likewise, on that right side where you see some rocks, we could call this the outflow for when the water levels become too high for the garden. We want a way for that water to be dispersed, but also dispersed a little slower. And again, we don't want to create erosion, so we put some rocks there to slow the water down. So to describe this in more detail, working kind of from the bottom up, you'll see it's a bowl shape or a depression in the ground. First, starting from the bottom up, that like tannish color is organic matter, such as compost. Usually it's about 3 layers or 3 inches. This compost acts as a filter and provides a home for microorganisms that decompose pollutants and create good environments for plants to live in. On top of that, the darker brown color is amended soil, which is a mix of sand and compost, which is specifically made to facilitate infiltration and be a good medium for the plants to grow in. And then finally, that kind of goldish color is a sand bed. If drainage is a problem, which it often is in New Jersey with our heavy clay soils, it might be necessary to add sand to improve drainage as it creates more airspace in the soil. One note is it's important to use a coarse grade of sand, not buying play sand or mason sand, because this could actually impede drainage rather than helping it. And finally, in the amended soils are rain garden plants. Actually, not finally. So we have the rain garden plants, which I'll talk about more in future slides, but you're also probably wondering, it says high water level and what that means. You can kind of see where that water level is. It goes into, it's the whole section of the garden that is exposed to the elements, and it is the deepest, it goes to the deepest part of the garden. And this area is supposed to drain within 72 hours, so about 3 days, to avoid problems with stagnant water like mosquitoes. And the maximum ponding depth is usually around 6 inches, but we'll talk about this later about how that also depends on your soil type. So that diagram might have been a little intimidating or daunting if you're thinking of starting a rain garden project on your property, but I'll assure you that it's much simpler than that diagram. And there are 3 major steps involved in the creation of a rain garden. Each one we'll go over in some greater detail. So we have planning, installation, and then everyone's favorite, but also the most important, maintenance. So first, in the planning stage, Kendra did a good job of giving some examples of homeowners' dilemmas that have happened, or just giving like an overview of where the water is running. But obviously we're not above the ground. We're not like birds. So we have to walk around and see during a rainstorm, get your rain boots on, get an umbrella and see where that water is going. This is a really critical part because you can't decide the best place for a rain garden without knowing where the water is going to flow. So first, where do you see it going? Where is it coming from? That's also a really important thing to note. follow it. Is it ponding in your yard somewhere? Is it actually flooding your neighbor? Or like Kendra said, also, are you flooding yourself? So this is a picture I think she showed before. The top is a home that is flooding their downhill neighbor. You can see where those arrows are going and where there's some erosion in the turf grass. And this is actually coming from the homeowner's downspouts are creating this kind of river that is flooding their neighbor. And then the second image is of a house that's being flooded by their own stormwater, which is flowing down their driveway from their house and right into their garage. So once you follow the water, know the source and the spot of where the water flows, it's time to refer to some manuals to start preparing. You can use Google to find either of these manuals online in virtual form. They basically tell you the exact same thing, but have different illustrations, both of which I think are very helpful. One of these is created by Rutgers, and the other is by the Native Plant Society of New Jersey. So now that you've done your walkabout in the rain, it's time to sketch your yard. Kendra went over this before, but I'll walk you through it again. Please note again, this is not to scale. You'll want to calculate the square footage of the drainage area that's going to be going into your future rain garden, coming from the roofs, sidewalks, pool houses, etc. You'll want to make observations to determine where that water is moving. And also you'll want to focus on where are you going to be most concerned with? Because as you saw in those diagrams, the water is all like from the 4 directions that your house slopes, it's all moving down, but you need to find the area you're most concerned with. So in this case, we're looking at how water is flowing off the roof and exiting from the downspout. There's a peak in the driveway that causes half the water to flow into the backyard. And there's part of the yard that is draining to the back. So determining where you want to put your rain garden is determining where the most soggy area of your yard is, where you're having the most issues. And so in this case, it's at the back of the house. And you'll also want to think about when you install your rain garden, again, with the direction of the flow, I mentioned an inlet and an outlet of the garden. So you want to make sure that the water is mostly going into the inlet, is able to be collected and absorbed in the rain garden, and then any excess is outletting either downhill or to somewhere else where it won't be causing issues for yourself or other people. So another part of the planning is, I mentioned, we've talked a little bit about soils, is whether your soil is suitable to put a rain garden right in, or if you need to amend some of your soil. You can do this yourself by doing a perk test, or for percolation. That's short for percolation test. And you can do that by following this diagram here. So starting from the left, the steps are dig a hole, fill that hole with water and let it stand until all the water has drained into the ground. Then refill the empty hole again with water and measure the depth of the water with a ruler about every hour for at least 4 hours to see how many inches of water are drained. About 1 inch of water draining per hour is an indication of good soil for a rain garden. If all the water does not drain in 24 hours, the site might not be appropriate for a rain garden, or the soil will need to be amended. As most of us in New Jersey have heavily compacted clay soils, you will most likely need to dig down deeper and have amended soil that has been specially created for the rain garden. Also, you'll want to research if you have a high water table. So if you dug down the 1 foot and it was muddy already, a rain garden might not be the best, because we don't want it to be interacting directly with the water table. So in that case, you might want to plant a vegetative swale, which is more like superficial grasses that have deep roots to do the infiltration work, but we're not digging down into the water table. So this is a table that shows a quick reference for drainage area to soil type. So if you have clay soil, you'll need to create a ponding depth of no more than 3 inches because you don't want your garden to hold water for longer than 48 to 72 hours. And if you have sandy soil, you can have a deeper ponding depth of up to 8 inches because that water should be able to absorb within the 2 to 3 day limit. So just because your soil does not have a great percolation test or absorb, like I said, it doesn't mean you can't have a rain garden. You might simply need to make it the ponding depth shallower or amend your soil. So a couple other things when choosing the right location, making it as close to the runoff source as possible is really helpful. So there's not a lot of wiggle room for the water to go somewhere else you're not expecting. Definitely you want to keep it at least 10 feet away from foundations. You don't want to be creating a rain garden right against your home. Next, before you dig, always check for underground utilities. Make sure the area is fairly level so you don't have to do more work in making it level. Keep it away from, if you have large trees, make sure to keep it away from the tree's drip line or where its roots come out to collect water. You don't want to interfere with that part of the tree. And don't place it where there's typically always standing water. That means it wouldn't be good for a rain garden. So the final slide of this planning section is to determine how big your rain garden should be, which might look a bit scary with the math, but it's not. So I'll give you an example. So Mr. and Mrs. Smith want to put in a rain garden because they have a flooding and soggy yard. They determined that the roof area where most of the water is running off is about 500 square feet. So that's the first number in that equation, all the way to the left. Then you choose the design storm, which is basically just a theoretical storm that has a specific intensity, duration, and volume accounted for. In this case, we chose 1.25 inches of rain uniformly raining over the area for 2 hours. Next, you have to choose how deep your rain garden will be. So we'll look at the portion of this table that tells us based on the soil, if it's clay, loamy, or sandy, how deep our ponding depth should be. And the Smiths found that they're customary with New Jersey, their soils are very clayey, so they will only dig down 3 inches. So those are all the numbers we need: 500 square feet times the 1.25 inch design storm, and then accounting for the ponding depth of the clay soil, we find that their garden should be 200 square feet. So the manuals that I mentioned before can tell you this, how to do this pretty simply. You can do a quick Google search, or you can ask a professional to help you if you are really concerned. So the next step of this rain garden tour is getting shovels into the ground for installation. So once you have dug the hole for your rain garden, you have a few options for soils. One, you can mix your own based on results of a soil test that you can get done by Rutgers Extension Program, or you can buy pre-mixed from a supplier such as Rutgers Landscaping or other landscaping companies. You can make your own custom mixes, but from experience, I found that it's easier to leave it to the professionals when dealing with what percentage of soils to add. It can also add up pretty quickly, just in bulk volume of how much sand or compost you need. And if you don't have a lot of space to be able to mix that thoroughly, it becomes a real hassle. Next, the part I enjoy the most, choosing the plants. So you want to choose plants suited for both inundation of water and also dry kind of beach type environments when it becomes a bit of a drought situation. Also, you want to make sure that the plants are chosen for the correct light conditions. So if you have a lot of shade or a lot of direct sun or in between. And typically we use plugs or larger plants in these gardens, not starting from seed. As you can see in this picture, all of the plants you can physically see, and they're big enough to be able to survive on their own quicker than a seed would. So here we have some commonly used plants in rain gardens. Many of them may look familiar or some may not. We have some blue flag iris, soft brush, some sedges. I see a lot of black-eyed Susans around. So why were these used? Because they're natives. So why is that important? Why do we use native plants? Well, they're well adapted to the local region, and so they don't require extra fertilization or chemicals to keep happy. They're resilient and water loving. And as you can see from this picture, their roots are dramatically longer and deeper and more extensive than non-natives. And this means that they're able to absorb, infiltrate, and filter more of that stormwater than non-natives. You can purchase native plants at many garden centers, or you can go through specifically native plant growers or distributors. That's what we prefer at the Watershed. And you should be wary at garden centers tags that say native, because they aren't always native to New Jersey. That is not a regulated term. So if you have questions, always happy to answer them at the Watershed Institute. And also for installation, I mentioned in the diagram about building in overflows. You should always prepare for this. You don't want to flood your neighbors or yourself. Since rain gardens are designed to capture only the first inch of rainfall, there needs to be a way for that extra water to flow out. And typically you can see here, we use large rocks as a way to slow down that water and prevent erosion. Next, we come to step 3 of the rain garden process, which is maintenance. Rain gardens in general are relatively low maintenance, but do require some occasional attention, especially in the first 2 years after installation. So this is not a plant and forget type of thing. It's kind of that after 2 years, but even then it still requires a little bit of a little TLC. So in the first few months of installing your rain garden, you'll need to water your garden pretty regularly to ensure the plants are able to become well established. They typically need to be watered for the first 2 years, at least an inch of water per week. And once established, the rain garden may need to be watered only during drought conditions. In addition, for maintenance besides watering, you should inspect your rain garden prior to the growing season and at the end of the growing season, see what's doing well, see what's not doing well, and also after large storm events or extreme weather conditions to see how it's handling that. If you notice some erosion after heavy rainfalls, you might need to build up berms or plant more grasses or sedges that can help keep that soil in place. And to slow down the flow of water in the garden in case gullies are forming, you can add berms or grasses to the area. And a pro tip, start from the beginning by spending the extra money and planting densely. Kind of like in this picture, you're not seeing much open bare soil, which not only squeezes out open ground for weeds, but also helps with that infiltration of water and not having to deal with erosion in the first place. So everyone's common enemy are weeds. You want to pull them out before they take hold, but the issue is that it can be very difficult if you're a beginning gardener, even seasoned gardeners. You can't know what every plant looks like, and especially at the beginning growing season, like right now, things sprouting up can all kind of look the same. So you want to make sure you plant simply. I recommend 3 to 5 plants. 3 plants are usually the best, so it's easy to identify what the plants are you want and what are weeds. Next, native grasses and sedges are great to use in rain gardens because they slow down water and prevent gullying, and their deep fibrous root systems help recharge groundwater. Leaving these plants tall in the winter months provides interest in the garden, but they do need to have some maintenance once a year. You should mow them down. Initially, mowing or cutting down should be done before growth begins in the spring and wildlife begins to return. So probably not now. Right now would not be a great time as things are starting to come out, but about a month ago or a little earlier would have been a great time for mowing down the native grasses. Some other maintenance steps are removing and replacing dead plants, replace them with things that have been successful. For those that have been plants that have been successful and create seeds, you can learn how to collect those and redistribute them around the garden. Make sure to reposition rocks to divert flow in the garden and protect areas from erosion with the various steps that I mentioned before. So here are a couple of frequently asked questions. One, will my rain garden cause a mosquito problem? If you caught what I said earlier in the presentation, rain gardens should drain all of their water in about 2 to 3 days. Mosquitoes actually have a 10-day life cycle from egg to adult. So if the water is draining within 3 days, the mosquitoes don't have time to go from egg to adult. Will my rain garden cause flooding? The short answer is no, not if it's sited and built correctly. That's why these steps of planning and installation are both really important. What about deer? So you can choose plants that deer don't find especially yummy. Also consider planting in the spring so the plants have a full summer season to mature, but also understand that no plant is deer proof. So some might get a bit munched and then you'll have to replace them. And for questions 4 and 5, I'll address those in the next slides. Again, how do I slow down the speed of water as it enters into the garden? Installing river rocks such as this at the entrance is the most successful way to slow it down. Also, you can put a layer of weed block fabric underneath those rocks to help keep weeds down, as it can be very frustrating having to pull weeds from in between all of those rocks. So this is also probably a question people are thinking about as you see these beautiful gardens, is how much does it cost? This is highly variable, and the image I have here is, again, an estimate, and it depends on local prices as well as how much labor you do yourself, where you get your plants from. But in this case, it can cost between $5 to $6 per square foot to construct a rain garden, not including labor or also having to rent equipment. So for a typical 100 square foot rain garden, it could cost around $580 for all of these different items that you can see here. But also if you do a lot of your own labor or have equipment already or can borrow some, that can highly reduce the costs. But the bottom line is rain gardens are designed to capture stormwater at its source before it becomes runoff, to not only to help address our issues with both water quality and quantity. Planting native plants will help the wildlife and also add a beautiful and inexpensive way to protect the water in your area. Here are some helpful websites that I can also share with the recording after this presentation. Finally, we have a local example that I'll go through quickly that was given to us through Joanne of the Green Team from a resident of Ewing. Just wanted to give this as a final story. So the resident said that they had removed a large tree to add an addition in their yard, which left them with rainwater washing the topsoil to the bottom of the yard. Then after the grass grew, the rainwater collected in large pools. They constructed a modest sized rain garden to take care of the rainwater from 3 backyard downspouts, which was enough to solve the soggy yard issue and the erosion, and provided lovely flowers that attracted butterflies and other pollinators all spring and summer. A buried pipe was also used to draw the rainwater from the downspout into the rain garden with an outlet at the end to a buried emergency overflow tank. It was installed in October 2020 by a Hopewell-based company, and these pictures are after a couple months in July 2021. So again, this is a local, simple local success story of how a resident used a rain garden to solve a stormwater runoff issue. So thank you so much. That's the end of our rain garden how-to portion of the presentation. And we're just gonna finish up with some shameless plugs for the program that I run at the Watershed, and then also some general Watershed programs. So I'm the River Friendly coordinator at the Watershed, and the River Friendly program focuses on individuals' actions and about behavior change, recognizing leaders in communities who are doing things, who are doing good environmental stewardship and changing behaviors with the ideas of the River Friendly in mind, of reducing water pollution, conserving water, restoring and improving wildlife habitat, and also educating others. So the picture you see here is of the survey that residents can take for this program to see kind of a checklist of things that you are or are not doing on your property to be more river friendly. Some examples are picking up after your dog or disposing of their waste to reduce the amount of bacteria that gets into the water, using soil tests to determine fertilizer or not using fertilizer at all, or planting native species on your property to enhance wildlife habitat. So another incentive for this is that there's a River Friendly Resident Challenge this year. And if you go on and take the survey, or if you've already taken the survey, so you're a current River Friendly resident, you get entered into a raffle to win these cool prizes like a stormwater assessment, a voucher towards our nature summer camp, some watershed programs, or our nature shop gift certificate. So then finally, a plug for some really cool upcoming events for the Watershed Institute. Next week, we have another webinar called our Watershed Wednesday series that's about do-it-yourself composting, which will be really great. And then after that, if anyone is a member of the Watershed Institute, we're having our annual meeting to celebrate those members that help us do the work that we do. And thinking into the summer months, which today it felt like summer with the 80-degree day, we have a solstice trail run. We'll also have some celebrations for Juneteenth. And then really far into the dog days of summer, we have put on the calendar August 6th for the Butterfly Festival. So thank you everyone so much for listening. I see Kendra is back on video, and so now we can address some of your questions.
So Olivia, we have one question, and it was asked when you were going over the diagram of a rain garden, and it says, can you use stones instead of mulch?
So you're saying like any open space you would put stones instead of mulch. I would probably say that that's not a great idea because it would limit the amount of area that other plants, like when the native plants have seeded, it will limit the amount where new seedlings can come up. Rocks are also really expensive, so it's probably not practically a good solution. We typically don't put that much mulch down because mulch doesn't really add that many nutrients to a rain garden, but we do put like a layer of compost, which is kind of, yeah, like it's compost, kind of like soil, just basic soil.
Great. And then we had another, So another question, are there specialists that we could hire to help install a rain garden? This comes from Marianne.
Yes, definitely. There are some people that have experience putting in green infrastructure like rain gardens at Rutgers Landscaping. There's also Richard McCoy Horticultural Services. Those are two that we have used a lot. So yeah, you can definitely get professionals to put in yourself because yeah, it's a lot to dig out.
All right. So Rainy Day asks, do you have any recommendations for shade-loving native plants to use in the rain garden?
Yeah, that is a good question. I have not worked with many rain gardens that are in a lot of shade, so I can't give you anything off the top of my head, but you can see my contact email right there. And if you email me, I can look that up for you.
All right. And Kristen writes, you said that rain gardens are not good in places that have standing water. I have a spot where water pools during storms, but it will drain completely within a day or two. Is that an inappropriate location?
No, and I thought that was a bit confusing when I said it actually. If you're saying that that standing water, like that puddle drains within 1 or 2 days, then that's fine. Standing water, I think means more like it's always soggy there, whether it just rained or hasn't. So it could almost be a little bit of like a wetland area. That's not a good place for a rain garden.
And that brings us to the next question. Can you talk a little bit about what to do with soggy garden areas?
Soggy garden areas. So you mean gardens that are already there, but are
I think the questioner is kind of getting at what you just talked about, that it's perma wet there. It's not just after a rainstorm that you were describing, that it's almost a bit of a marshland or wetland.
Yeah, then if that's the case, again, like I said, probably not a great place for a rain garden, but there are a couple like really water loving plants that you could put there to stabilize the soil to prevent any type of erosion. The two I like to suggest are Juncus effusus, which is a type of rush. It looks kind of like a grass, but it's more sturdy and like straighter, standing up like a grass. Or Iris versicolor, which the common name is blue flag iris. That's a type of native iris that really loves water, stabilizes soil. However, it can become a bully in the garden and really take over, but that just means a little bit of maintenance of thinning it out.
All right, excellent. Any more questions for me or Olivia about rain garden, stormwater, what have you? Well, it looks like that's all the questions we have for this evening. I am so thankful that you had us here this evening. And as you can see, our contact information is there. You feel free to contact us whenever you want. The Watershed Institute is here to help our community better address their water issues, and Ewing is part of that. We will make sure that the Ewing Green Team has this recording so that you will be able to contact them for it. And Olivia, do you have anything else you want to add before we close it up?
No, I think you summed it up really well. Thank you everyone for listening, and have a great rest of your night.
All right, be well.